evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for March the 10th, 2020. Would you please join us and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, Sigrid?
Yes. Commissioner Holt,
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Present.
Commissioner Polgar.
Present.
Is it not working? I'll fix it. Vice Chair Reddick
Here.
and Chair Benjamin.
Here.
All commissioners are present this evening.
That's nice. Thank you. Barring objection from the commission, I'd like to interrupt our regular order of agenda and allow Jill to have the floor for just a moment to recognize a new addition to the team tonight.
Thank you. Very briefly, we're happy tonight to have Tara Hatcher. She's our new administrative assistant to the Community Development Department. Tara's been with us since early December. Bridget is teaching her all kinds of magical tricks with how to work through the Planning Commission items, but Tara is doing a lot of other things for us as well, and it's been fantastic. She is a local, and I told her that I'd probably embarrass her just a skosh, but that's it. So anyway, Tara's here, and she's happy to be here.
Thank you. Welcome, Tara. All right, back to regular order. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Colleagues, are there any additions or corrections? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Sarah and I abstain.
I abstain.
Okay, so it's a quorum of 3 for this one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the public comment period. This is the portion of our Planning Commission meetings where anyone in the public who would like to talk to the Planning Commission about an item that is not on our agenda is welcome to do so. So at the moment, I have a green sheet. I'm pretty sure it's pertinent. I have someone who wants to speak, but it looks like it's the item that's actually under consideration tonight. So except for that, if there's anyone who wants to talk to us about anything, now is the time. So I'm going to open and close the public communications. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is our regular public hearing item section, and we have just one tonight. That item is an application for a CDP at 631 Mill, and the staff report will be handled by Brittany, I would imagine.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. We are happy to be back with the 631 Mill Mixed Use Project. I will go through the project presentation before taking clarifying questions from the commission, then public comment and commissioner discussion. So the project scope includes demolition of the existing single-family residence and construction of a new 2-story mixed-use commercial office and residential building in the commercial downtown zoning district, just west of Main Street next to the Millrose Inn. The permits requested include a coastal development permit, use permit, architectural review, and a parking exception. This project was brought to the Planning Commission for hearing last April, and discussion at this meeting primarily focused on the requested parking exception, as well as drainage and traffic flow issues in the project area. Since this first hearing, the project has been revised to address concerns brought up by the Planning Commission and by adjacent neighbors. I will discuss these plan changes in more detail as we go through the presentation. The project applicant installed story poles for the first hearing, as the project includes a parking exception request. The applicant was not required to install story poles a second time, as this requirement has been fulfilled. I will try to move through these project review components briefly to refresh everyone's memory from the first hearing. So the proposed building has a neo-traditional design with a residential aesthetic. As the site has double frontages on Mill and Parisma Streets, the building emphasizes the corner with a covered porch leading to the first floor office entrances. The second office space is entered on Parisma Street with a matching front porch. Each entryway has an upper balcony above it, serving the residential units on the second floor. The front entryways to the offices have been bumped out towards the property line since you saw this last to create a more inviting commercial storefront without necessitating an additional parking space from the change in office floor area. The residential units are accessed from a staircase on the Mill Street frontage next to the residential garage spaces, as you can see in this southwest rendering. So the site plan shows the first story floor plan with the 2 office spaces and 2 restrooms, a trash and recycling enclosure, and the commercial and residential parking spaces with 2 EV chargers in the garages. The trash enclosure area has been revised since the first hearing to accommodate the tote bins on the wall furthest from the adjacent residence. And the building is sited at the front of the parcel for pedestrian-friendly street access with the parking screened behind the building. The project proposes to completely remove and replace the sidewalks fronting the property to be reconstructed to ADA and city standards. The project will also formalize the crosswalks at this corner and here and restripe the 4 on-street parking spaces on the Mill Street frontage, as well as 2 on-street parking spaces kitty corner, which I will show you further later in the presentation. So the second floor plan shows the 2 residential units, each 2-bed, 2-bath, with outdoor balcony areas and attic storage space. There are no window openings on the first floor north elevation as the wall is within 3 feet of the property line, as is allowed by the commercial downtown zoning. The second story steps in slightly from this north elevation with high sill windows in consideration of the residential neighbor, with the exception of 1 bedroom window where a larger window is required for fire safety and egress. This is the east elevation as seen from Parisma Street of the front of the building with the 2 office entrances. The west elevation as seen from the parking lot, showing the staircase accessing the residential units, the residential garage spaces, and the covered trash enclosure. And the south elevation as seen from Mill Street, where you can see the area where the backflow devices are screened from view by this door under the staircase. You can also see the proposed solar array. So the proposed materials include include horizontal wood siding, cedar trim and columns, and composition roof shingles. And proposed colors are tans with white trim and burnt sienna roof shingles. The landscape plan includes a diverse palette of native drought-tolerant species with planter areas in the parking lot and along the new sidewalks with new strawberry trees in sidewalk tree wells. The site is currently flat and developed with impervious surfaces, and the preliminary grading and drainage plans indicate that site drainage will be sufficiently directed to planter areas. The parking lot will be constructed of pervious concrete as well. The city engineer has reviewed the submitted plans and has worked with the applicant to confirm that site drainage is sufficient to move forward with the building permit and to meet city standards. So this site is located in the downtown specific plan area. The downtown specific plan guides redevelopment and has several policies directly applicable to this proposal, including provision of off-street parking, compatibility of scale and mass with surrounding development, encouragement of mixed-use projects with upper floor residential uses, and provision of new street trees, all of which this project conforms with. Mixed-use projects in the commercial downtown zoning district currently require a use permit. the Planning Commission must find that the establishment, maintenance, or conducting of the use will not be detrimental to the public welfare or to the neighborhood. Mixed-use development is consistent with the commercial downtown zoning district and the pattern of development in the surrounding area. The proposed building provides a live-work opportunity as well as additional downtown residential units, which contributes to the vitality of the town center and supports the city's housing needs. Staff also notes that the proposed project would not require a use permit with the updated zoning ordinance recently approved by council and submitted to the Coastal Commission for certification. The commercial downtown zoning district does not have any setback, floor area, or lot coverage requirements. The proposed development is a well-scaled and massed two-story building with approximately 4,280 square feet of floor area total at 26.5 feet tall, where the zoning allows up to 36 feet. The CD zoning also requires landscaping in parking areas and elsewhere on site as feasible, as well as 4 short-term parking spaces, which is provided through this project. The current parking standards require 2 garage spaces per residential unit and 1 uncovered space per 250 square feet of office. So as we discussed at the last hearing, a parking exception is requested as this project proposes 3 garage spaces where 4 total would be required and 4 uncovered spaces where 5 is required by the code. So in total, 7 spaces are proposed where the zoning code requires 9 currently. The parking lot has been designed to accommodate safe pull-in and back-out space with an ADA compliant van parking and unloading area in this corner here, and additional landscaping to meet the zoning and drainage requirements for the site. 2 long-term bicycle parking spaces are also provided here and here to supplement the vehicle parking, and on-street parking is available along both street frontages. So the live, work, design, and location in the downtown area with access to alternative modes of transportation supports a reduction in the required parking spaces. The residential use will also be able to use the uncovered parking spaces outside of office hours. There are 2 zoning code sections that currently allow flexibility in mixed-use projects in the CD zoning district. One that allows the Planning Commission to modify residential development standards for mixed-use projects as part of any use permit, and the other encouraging dwelling units to be on the upper floors of mixed-use projects with 2 garage spaces per unit unless otherwise approved by the Planning Commission. Staff also notes that the proposed development would fully comply with the updated mixed-use parking standards in the pending zoning ordinance with provision of the shared use reduction or the guest parking waiver. So the project is fully in compliance with the land use plan as it is not located in or adjacent to any environmentally sensitive habitat area. It is not in a visual resource area or on a coastal access route, or in an area mapped or known for cultural resources. The existing residence proposed for demolition is over 50 years old, so a historic resource analysis was required to assess historic significance. So the subject site is not listed on the city's historic resources or contributors inventory, and the evaluation found that the site is not eligible for listing in the city's inventory or on the California Register. The residence is not associated with any significant historic event or historic figure, is characterized as a simplified craftsman that does not exhibit any character-defining features of the architectural period, and it does not retain any historic integrity. So the evaluation concluded that the existing structures are not historically significant under CEQA. The proposed development is categorically exempt from CEQA under sections 15301 and 15303 as cited here. There will be no impacts to historic resources as concluded by the historic resource evaluation, and there is no evidence of unusual circumstances or cumulative impacts that would cause an adverse environmental impact. So as I mentioned early on, the first hearing brought up concerns about parking, drainage, and traffic flow at this intersection. The applicant proposes to stripe 2 additional on-street parking spaces at that kitty corner fronting 415 Parisma Street, in addition to restriping these parking spaces. These are unformalized parking spaces currently where we often see 1 car taking up the whole area where there is room for 2. Staff has worked closely with the city engineer to visit the site, to look at traffic and drainage, including during a very heavy rain event. This storm drain did seem to be functioning well during the heavy rain event, and Public Works is aware of the need for regular maintenance of that storm drain, including on a as-needed basis if blockages occur from leaves and such. So the owner of 415 Parisma Street would be responsible for these frontage and drainage improvements at this location. At the time it is proposed for development, but staff finds that it is outside the scope of this proposed project. So lastly, with the discussion on the 4-way stop sign, the city's traffic safety group has reviewed the proposal for a 4-way stop sign at this intersection and agreed that it is an appropriate public safety improvement. Next steps to make this happen include conducting a warrant analysis to make sure the 4-way stop meets all applicable traffic codes and obtaining city council approval. A few final notes related to landscaping. The project proposes strawberry trees to be planted at the back of curb as new street trees. This is an appropriate species on the Parisma frontage where there are heavy overhead utility lines, and this is a species that is easy to maintain at a lower height. The commission could consider a different tree variety on the Mill Street frontage, such as the Chinese elm that can be seen in front of Main Street Sushi down the street on Mill. The project also proposes a new fence along the northern property line here to match the existing fence in the rear between the project site and the Millrose Inn. The zoning code requires a solid masonry or concrete wall where a residential use is adjacent to a non-residential use in the commercial downtown zoning district, as is the case here. However, we find that the intent of the solid wall is to provide the residential neighbor with the benefit of sound attenuation, and that intent is being met here as the first floor wall facing the residence does not have any openings, and the non-residential use is designed to be a low-intensity, low-noise-generating office use. The pending mixed-use code allows the Planning Commission to consider a lower fence height or alternate fence materials. So in light of that, staff recommends that you can require the masonry wall in order to meet the code of the day, with language allowing the applicant to come back at the time that the new code is in effect to request a minor amendment from the planning director. So in conclusion, the project is in conformance with the city's local coastal program. The project has a valid Measure D certificate and is supportive of city council priorities for providing residential units in the town center and fostering a vibrant downtown. The project also supports the housing element by providing 1 additional dwelling unit than was accounted for. And the parking spaces are nearly in conformance with the current zoning code requirements as feasible and are supplemented by on-street and bicycle parking areas. The project has been noticed pursuant to the requirements of the LCP, including mailed notices to owners and occupants within 300 feet, a published newspaper ad, and a posting notice on the site. The project architect is here tonight and is available to speak to the project or answer any questions. And staff recommends approval of this project with the revised conditions included in the memo you received today, and the recommended motion is included on this slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Before we have a public hearing, are there any clarifying questions that the commission would like to ask of staff? Steve?
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany. That's very well organized, very useful. I recall from our meeting last April when we first considered this project that there were reports from the neighbors affected by this project of drainage problems in and around that intersection. The investigations that you just told us about by Public Works, I'm guessing were pretty anecdotal and wouldn't resolve the cause or scope of the issues that the neighbors were complaining. But I'm just want to ask if we know anything further about that.
Excuse me, we'll have a public hearing in a moment, but for right now, you'll need to wait. Thank you.
So we believe we have a pretty good sense of the worst case situation with regards to a heavy rain event. And I don't remember which day we were out, but it was coming down hard, and we all got excited because that's when we go out and look at water courses and drainages to see how they're functioning. And it was raining so hard I think we drove, which is not what we usually do. We usually walk. So it was a good example of the system moving water well, and it was clear that the storm drain inlet was cleaned. And so we really believe this is a routine maintenance need. So when it's not working, it's very likely that a neighbor should give us a call and we'll swing somebody around just to make sure it cleans out. It's hard because, we have all these wonderful trees, and rain events bring more leaves onto the street, and then they, of course, move over and plug the drain that we're supposed to be protecting. So it's just ongoing, and our city engineer is very, very comfortable with it. So I hope that helps. And he also reviewed, of course, the plan for development of the site to ensure that the project does not contribute additional runoff into the area. The plan is contained, the proposal is contained on site.
Thank you. Anything else, Steve? Anybody else? Yes.
I was going to ask about the containment of water on the site and the use of materials, but you've already answered that question. The project mentions the electric vehicle charging, but I notice it's contained within the garage, so there's no public benefit to the charging. It's more a private benefit to the owners of the business. Is that a fair statement? Okay, thank you.
Anything else? One question from me. In the memo that we received, it mentioned that we were going to clarify level 2 and that I should look for the strikeout correction, and it's probably me, but I can't find it. And I trust that it's there. I just am.
It's on 2B.
Oh, thank you. Male blindness. And with that, I think we should hear from the public. So we'll open the public hearing. We have one green sheet for this item. It is not the applicant, I believe. If the applicant wants to address the project, fill out a green sheet after you speak, but welcome to the podium.
Are we all here? Yeah. My name is Chris Ridgway. I'm the architect on the project, and I'd like to introduce you to Eddie Bandini Sr. and Eddie Bandini Jr. They've been both really great to work with on this property. The Bandini family's been on the coast longer than I have, that's for sure. I think I'll jump right to the water first, since we were just on that topic. I was concerned about the stories that I kind of anecdotally heard last time, so I insisted that that my clients hire a civil engineer at this point, which we would normally only do later. So we hired the civil engineer, and then I also said, I wanted you to go out to the site with me, and let's grab somebody from the city engineering and all walk the site and make sure that we're all kind of I don't want a problem. So We looked at not only that intersection, but the kind of tributary areas that would take water to it. And the water kind of goes to the kitty corner opposite side, which would be the southeast corner. And then it goes underneath the street and it comes over on the other side, on the opposite side of the street as we are. And so my civil engineer felt very confident that it would be really difficult to flood the street that well to make it overflow. And so he's the one that's the expert, and so I talked to him about that. I also talked to him about another idea I floated about maybe doing some sort of a swale, that a bioretention area, and he laughed at me that it wasn't big enough to do anything. But we had also talked about in the meeting about maybe taking the storefront, bringing it out closer to the street. And after going over with my civil engineer, we really needed to recess the porch back like I originally drew, because it allows us to slope up the sidewalk even higher. We have to make it flush so we can get a wheelchair in, but that extra porch buys us a room to get higher from the street. So anyhow, that was one of the major concerns that was brought up last time, and I think we've done our homework to do it, and the city has been really great working with us about that. So with that, I'll kind of jump back to the overall concept. The zoning here is commercial downtown. I really love the idea of combining both the residential and the commercial. I think they both bring attractive things to the town. We put the commercial downstairs, and so pedestrians walking by would be able to see it and easily access it. It also kind of extends the downtown core a little bit, which is nice. I really like having the residences there too, because then it means people are occupying the building all the time, both that care about it, both in the day with the offices and then the residences at night. And having those kind of eyes on the street, and people, if there is a problem, they'll report it, take care of it. If there's trash, they'll clean it up. But it's just good city planning to do that, and so I'm glad the city is open to doing that. The other thing that it opens up the possibility is, if it's live and work, that somebody might live in the building that would also work in the building. That takes cars off the commuting traffic, which is good, which means less pollution. And then also it would require less parking. So that's, I think, a good benefit of the project. We have 3 garages plus 4 spaces in the lot, so that's 7 plus 5 on the street, which is total 12 spaces for this. I think that's adequate. We could start to play kind of games with it in the sense that we have 2 bedrooms in each of these residences, and I think it's really handy in this day and age that a lot of people do work from home, and so having 2 residences would work really nicely. To have an office and a bedroom would work very nicely. If we eliminated one of those bedrooms, then technically we wouldn't need a parking exception, but I don't think that's good for the building. Almost every other building that I know of has parking exceptions. All you have to do is walk down Main Street.
Mr. Ridgway, we read that part of the report. We're clear on.
Okay, I'll move on. Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that. If someone wanted to put parking above all else, we could satisfy putting the entire lower level in parking, which would put 2 offices above it, which would make a 3-story building, which I can't imagine anybody would prefer over the 2-story building that we proposed. But if that's the goal, to meet the parking at any cost, that would be the solution. I love designing houses that are in the corner and buildings in the corner where you're able to wrap the facade around and have the porch. We've hidden the parking behind the building. We've hidden the recycling even more in the porch behind the building. I've worked really hard not to make the building too tall. We've dropped the house floor about 3 feet from what's existing right now. And so the building is less tall in that sense. And then I also didn't put any utilities between the floors, which would raise it up. So we worked really hard about keeping the house, the overall building, as low as possible. I touched base on Rick's idea about moving out the storefronts, and from a civil engineering way, we can't do that. And also, it would add more square footage to the building, which would technically require us to have another parking space. So, I've worked with a neighbor before the meeting, Pam Dorr, and changed the plans. I've changed the plans after the meeting with them. So we've changed the upstairs and pushed it further back, changed the windows to make it smaller. several times. We've put no windows on the downstairs, so we've been very respectful to the neighbor that's to the north. So if you have any questions, I'm here to ask.
Thank you very much. So I have one green sheet from a member of the public who likes to speak, and that would be Dr. Moss. Welcome.
Thank you very much. There's about 3 or 4 issues I want to bring up that are important to me.
You've got about 3 minutes. So.
Okay, I'm going to talk fast then. The first is that I disagree with the drainage issue that this lady stated, because we get flooded about 5 or 6 times per year at the corner of Prisma and Mill Street, because the drainage shown on the map goes under the road, goes to a bubbler on our corner, the water goes up, and ever since they put a handicap ramp there, the water goes up the ramp and into our building, and then we have to pull up the carpet about 5 or 6 times a year to address the flooding that goes into our building. So there is drainage problems here, regardless of what the city has stated. Okay, the other thing I want to say is that I was required to put a solid masonry wall between my building and the duplex next to me, per city guidelines at additional cost to me, because that was the rule then, and I guess they're getting an exception to that rule. The other thing I had to do was reduce the square footage of my building when I built it in order to provide the required 8 parking spaces, including 1 handicap parking space. I don't know if they're required to have a parking space for handicapped or not, but I was required to do that for my commercial building due to ADA requirements. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that it doesn't seem very fair to me, because I followed all the rules that were put in place when I built my building, and now all these exemptions are being granted for the new building. No masonry wall, half the parking almost of what I had to put in, and other factors as well. So it just doesn't seem fair and equitable to me, because I followed all the rules when I built my building, and now they're getting exemptions on many, many points in their building, and it just doesn't seem fair and equitable to me at all, because it costs an economic cost to me to reduce the size of my building to comply with the rules and regulations that the city put upon me. And now those are just being thrown out the window, a lot of them, and these exemptions are being given to the new building, which does not seem very fair and equitable when you grant waivers for all these things. And I wasn't allowed to have any waivers at all, 0 waivers. I had to comply with every single rule every step of the way. And when we have a heavy rain event, again, we have flooding of our building. So I would recommend the city put an actual drain in front of my building at the corner there to shoot the water down the street, because all the water from Main Street all the way down the whole road to in front of the church, we have no drainage at all on those 2 blocks. So that's another reason why we have water problems. I've been there for 20 years, and every single year we have water drainage problems. And I just don't feel we should have 2 sets of rules, you know, for my project, and then have another set of rules for another project just because time has gone down the road and all these exemptions are being granted. It just does not seem fair and equitable to me, because I complied with every single rule that the city gave me to comply with, and now all these exemptions are being granted compared to what I had to go through when I built my building. So I'm just voicing my concerns. I think it's not just, there's a little injustice here to me, because I had to go through a lot of hoops and comply with every single rule. And now you're granting all these exemptions and bending the rules, and it just does not seem fair to me at all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wanted to address the Planning Commission with respect to this item? If not, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Do you want to hear, did staff have any particular comments? Okay, if barring opposition from the commission, let's hear what staff has to say in response. Jill or Brittany?
So we would like to respond to the concerns of the last speaker. And first of all, we will redouble back with the city engineer regarding the drainage. again, we believe it is a maintenance issue, but we will bring that back to him. We need to bring to your attention what we believe is the actual record with the really nice development across the street from this project. The development, in fact, was inspiration for work that was done on the new parking code that is still going forward and was used as a way to reverse engineer. We have some of the documentation. We just pulled a few pieces tonight, but we have a Planning Commission report from January 1998 that clearly notes that the project required a parking exception. The project also received a categorical CEQA exemption. In fact, one of the same CEQA exemptions that you're considering for the project at hand. We'd like to show a little more information about parking as well, because we think we're being wholly consistent, and we know that there's been some concern, and it's been a long time since this project went through, so we don't know all the hoops that it went through. I respect what we heard, certainly from our comment from our business owner, the local dentist, and his beautiful project. I'm happy to meet with him and spend some time with him, but this is the parking, this is a really quick and dirty parking presentation, looking at the project that you just heard about, and then looking at what's being considered for the project before you tonight. So under the current code, reminding all of us that we don't have that snazzy new code yet, but you are allowed to consider exemptions. Under the current code, the dentist office with the 2 units would have required 11.4 parking spaces. The projects are substantially similar. The existing building has about 1,600 square feet of office space. The project, it probably has some space that can be netted out for a parking calculation. We didn't go into that level of a depth. That said, it would not be more than half a space difference. The project before you has 1,300 square feet of commercial space, so it's smaller. Both projects have 2 units upstairs, and so they would, under the code of the day, require 2 garage spaces per unit and 1 space for every 250 square feet of the commercial space, plus 1 guest parking space. And we just summed it up. We did not bring you the minutia of the math. But you can see the exception is substantially similar that is being requested with the project before you. Now, then we considered the pending code, and I would have recommended, if the code was on the books, I would have recommended that you consider granting the guest parking waiver for these projects, as opposed to the mixed use reduced parking, because with the garage spaces, those spaces cannot be shared, and the mixed use shared use parking reduction is based on having a shared pool. So we would have suggested taking 1 spot off for each of those for the guest parking, because there's enough commercial parking that would be a nice compatible use with the residential and likely available in the evenings and on the weekends when guests are most likely to be out and about and visiting. So in this case, the new code is 1.5 spaces per units with 2 or more bedrooms, and then 1 space per 300 square feet of floor area. And then I took the liberty of taking off the guest parking space, which only you can do. I can't approve those. That's a Planning Commission discretion. But you can see that the pending code, frankly, it was a model for, it was one of the numbers of projects that had been granted a parking exception by the Planning Commission over recent years, where absent a parking exception, these projects would really not be, they wouldn't be pencil out, they would not have a very nice development form, as you heard the applicant's architect describe with regards to how to actually shoehorn in parking on a 5,000 square foot lot. And with the pending code, they both conform. So we we hope that this is helpful to you because we know there's been concern, and I don't know, again, what the whole story is, and I would really like to know more about it. And absolutely respect the drainage comments. We tried very hard to see what was going on during heavy rain events. We also have prepared another item for you that we can click through really, really quickly. Oh, and that was our parking study in case you need it. The neighbor next door brought to our attention that she had recently installed solar panels on her home. So first of all, this was done with knowledge of this project coming forward, and there is no solar access right relative to a building being built on this site. There's nothing wrong with what you're looking at. But we wanted to know, because she was disappointed, and we were surprised because she knew about the project. So we did a quick study. This is not, one that I would put in an application like what Mr. Ridgway would do, but Mr. Ridgway also did a solar study. He looked at one day. We both looked at the same day. We looked at the winter solstice. That's usually what we do when we have a building that is south of the site. It's the easiest way to see what an impact might be. And Mr. Ridgway's drawing he did it at noon, and it exactly matched what we got at noon, which is no coverage at all on the neighboring roof. At 8 a.m., when we're probably not producing a lot of energy generating photons, there's a little bit of a corner. And winter at 10 a.m., then at noon, the coverage goes away. Winter at 2.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Which project has the
Sorry,
solar panels?
sorry, I've been looking at this so long. We've been working on this very quickly today. This is the project on the corner. This is Mill. This is Parissima. This is the roof of the neighbor's house. This is also putting the neighbor's roof very, very low, which makes it look worse than it is. So, and the neighbor has a pitched roof, and we're showing a flat roof. So it would perform better than what we're showing you. And the solar panels were installed in this area. So this wouldn't touch it, but there's a little bit on the solstice. There's no coverage at all in the equinoxes, obviously not in the summer, but it's substantially maintaining solar access of the property next door. And we wanted you to know that we really did look into it, and appreciated also that the applicant's architect did a study as well, and that we have two that match each other.
Thank you. Were there any other comments, or was that
I
where we are?
think that covered it. Yeah,
I'm
we're
sensing
done.
that
We're good.
one of the
Thank you.
commissioners wants to follow up on your little study there. Rick?
The impact to the adjacent property in terms of shadows on the roof is coming from the roof, not any kind of stucco wall or non-stucco wall, or there's no impact from any kind of wall, is there?
No, that's from either the ridge line or the plate line, depending on the azimuth angle that we are working with. Yes.
Thank you. And I'm sure since Chris helped write the daylight plane rule for the city, I'm sure he could speak about that all night long, but that's great. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other comments from, it looks like a member of the public might have wanted to follow up, but I want to hear from the commission. If they need you to stop back, we'll make that point. So colleagues, who wants to share their thoughts about the project? Yes, Sarah.
So just to clarify, while whether or not there are drainage issues on the street, this project is containing the runoff on site. And so it's the issue is not necessarily whether there was nothing that necessarily the applicant was going to be able to do for the street. Is that my understanding? Because I don't understand what impact this, based on what I see, I'm not seeing an impact from the project on drainage. And so I want to clarify to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. Well, not negating that there may be drainage issues, but I'm just not understanding. So that's correct?
That is correct. We found that it was outside the scope of the proposed project to make drainage improvements in the public right-of-way beyond the project site. A standard condition of approval applied to this project and others similar to it, that the project is required to contain all drainage on site. That's condition B17. Our city engineer also takes a look at these plans in the coastal development permitting stage as well as the building permit to confirm this.
And then one other thing, just to clarify, I'm understanding those parking spaces, literally, striping is literally striping. It's not paving.
Correct.
Okay.
Anybody else? Rick, you want to come again?
Just to go back to the project from a qualitative perspective, from city staff or the engineer's perspective, with respect to quality of rainwater retention, is there a improvement, degradation, or no discernible change in terms of how the site will be handling water and drainage?
Commission, long time no see. Thank you. I'm not Maz, I apologize. I wish this was Maz and not me. That being said, I have taken a look at this. I've spoken to our staff, and clearly the conditions themselves require at least one additional BMP, best management practice item included in that. I'm guessing that might include additional ones beyond that. Given the difference in impervious area between this project and the other, I think we can comfortably say that there will be a net improvement, or no net change, but I believe there'll be a net improvement in the quality of water ultimately coming off of that site.
Thank you.
I can go.
Yes, absolutely. Brian?
First, I'd just like to mention, I think the last time Mr. Dowdy was here at the Planning Commission was during the PG&E power shutoff, and here we are in the middle of the coronavirus situation. So I'm ready to comment on the project.
Please.
Okay, I don't see anything not to like here. I think this is a great project. I think meeting our housing goals, I think the multi-use, multifamily is what we're, or the multi-use sort of design is what we're striving for. And I appreciate it substantially what meets the code that we're working towards, and substantially meets what's been done in the past. I think it's a nice design, good job, as we heard. It's not contributing and potentially is improving water drainage from the site. So I think it's all great. To some of the neighbors' comments, I think I just find that the concerns about fair and equity interesting for a project that was built over 20 years ago. I'm sure these applicants feel that they're having to jump through a lot of hoops as well, and I would imagine that there's some economic cost differences that they're having to deal with just the change in time of 20 years and the cost of construction and everything else. So I think it's a little bit of apples and oranges. So with that, I think the project is nicely designed, meets a lot of our goals, and accomplishes what we're looking to do. I think will be a nice addition to downtown.
Thank you. Commissioner Reddick.
On the subject of parking, as Commissioner Holt was just alluding to, the times have dramatically changed in the last 20 years. It's not a capricious change in the way the city has zoned for parking. We've spent a lot of time in recent months working on modernizing our zoning downtown, including with a big emphasis on parking. And the reason for that is to give us a some chance to win parts of this battle for housing and revitalize downtown. So it's in the pursuit of a very good cause. Last week I had the pleasure of attending the annual League of Cities Planning Commissioner Academy in Sacramento, and the overriding theme in that was people from about 200 cities throughout the state trying to come to grips with the housing crisis that California is dealing with. You know, our housing gap is tens or hundreds of thousands of units and getting worse every year rather than better. And all of these cities are similarly struggling with the outmoded parking zoning laws that they're stuck with from code that is about a generation old in many cases. So I personally think that we and many other cities will be making more compromises soon in our parking, the way we approach parking downtown, and we have to be flexible about that. Beyond that, I'm very positive and very appreciative of aspects of this project that support the housing element, support our vision of mixed use downtown, the concept of extending the feeling of downtown a little bit from Main Street to the west is very nice. ADA compliant sidewalks is a good thing, and I'm a big fan of the scale and the mass that project will bring to Mill Street and fit in with the property across the street from it. So I'm very supportive of the whole thing.
Commissioner Polgar.
I would just strongly echo Commissioner Holt and Commissioner Ruddock's comments. I'm strongly in favor of the project, and I'm not going to repeat the things they said because I agree with them. The only other thing that I would add is I also think it is a good idea to include the language for the flexibility about the concrete wall if the applicant would want to go back at some point to ask for an amendment. And I think that's valuable because especially if neither neighbor wants it, I see that allowing that flexibility is valuable. So I would add that in, but that's about it.
Rick?
I support Sarah's comments with respect to the wall. Since it's in our purview to provide flexibility here and both neighbors are asking for relief, I'm very comfortable with that. I really appreciate the applicant taking the feedback we provided during the last session, taking a look at some of the things we requested. I think you've tried to accommodate those requests. I do think that as you finish the windows and think about the commercial aspect of the building, does it invite people, does it have curb appeal? There are a number of projects on Main Street and the surrounding area that do pass that bar. So I just encourage you to look at it. I know you've already thought through it, but I'm not going to ask you to do any more than you've already done because I think you've done a great deal, and I appreciate that. It's a great project. It's a corner building. You've done a lot of work on it. I've had Chris design the corner building that I live in, and I appreciate the work that he did for me. So I think you've got a great project here. On the issue of this does not seem fair or the notion of capriciousness, I think certainly in the time that I've been on the Planning Commission, we've tried to establish consistency. We've also evolved our thinking on things under the direction of the current City Council. And so the policies have evolved. But I think if I look at the body of work I've been involved with since I've been here, there has been a consistent growth in our policy. So there's a foundation that I think we've really built on, and we're responding to changes that have happened in the last 20 years within the city. So I think we really try hard to make this a fair and equitable and consistent policy, but things do change over time. I am concerned about the drainage. I would love to get feedback on the drainage at some point in the future. I think this is an important issue, and the problems that the neighbor is expressing are serious, and a little bit of oversight we have over this. I think it's important for us to figure out exactly what's happening, and I know we've done some preliminary research, including work that the applicant has done to make sure that they're not causing more damage. But I support this project wholeheartedly, and I think it's a fine example of stuff we can do in the downtown core.
Thank you. I'll just add a couple of thoughts on the project. I also feel supportive of the project. I appreciated, especially I think it's important for us to acknowledge the time and effort that the neighbors put into trying to understand the project and voice their concerns about it. And I feel a certain resonance with some of those concerns, but I think staff has been pretty careful in understanding that the nature of the project is not aggravating the conditions that exist that are adverse. In other words, the bar is not that it solve the problem, it's that it not aggravate the problem. And my understanding of staff's position is that that is the case, that we're not making the problem worse because we're increasing permeable area and we're following BMPs that require the retention of, 10-year, 25-year storms or something on site. That is not to say that there is not legitimate drainage problems. If you don't think I care about drainage, ask around. They'll tell you. I also appreciate the value of solar gain, and I thought that was a well-studied problem. In general, as I understand it, state law provides some protection of solar gain from, for example, trees, but I don't think that it provides that same protection with respect to housing. So you could, if a neighbor wanted to put a redwood next to your house, I'm not sure they could, if it blocked out your solar gain, I think that might be an issue. But yeah, but I'm not a lawyer, so what do I know? And in this case, the analysis suggests to me that the solar impact is pretty minimal. With respect to the wall, I feel like the staff report provides a very Solomonic resolution of that issue. I was concerned in the draft report because the zoning ordinance is quite clear. It says that there shall be a wall, and either there's a shall or there isn't. And the way, as revised in the staff report, we're imposing the wall and we're giving staff the flexibility down the line when the amendment is certified, if it is certified, that they can get relief from that and operate with the new constraints. It is certainly true that this is, one might not have made the same decision 20 years ago. 1998 was, I think, my first or second year on the Planning Commission. I can't remember the project catty-corner from this one very well, but I appreciated staff's recollection of the parking. And I certainly, I like to think that as our understanding of the community's needs adapts to, the conditions in the state and the conditions in our town, that we don't maintain a consistency to a standard that no longer meets our community's needs. So I'm okay with the difference, acknowledging that it might make it harder in some ways and easier in others as they change. Parking is going to continue to be a problem downtown, whether we grant this exception or not. And with that, I'd like to, if there are no other comments, I'd like to ask whether there's a motion with respect to this resolution as modified by the staff report.
To the chair, could I make one more comment before
Please.
we do that? Thank you. I wanted to echo Commissioner Hernandez just now. I think that we hear from Public Works that this project will not aggregate whatever the drainage issues are in that intersection, but if Dr. Moss reports his building being flooded 5 or 6 times a year, that's unacceptable. So we have to do something to go look at that problem when it's happening. I'd really urge staff to be aggressive about following up with him on that.
We would love it if you would contact us when it's occurring. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that comment, could I please, would anyone care to make a motion with respect to the resolution next in order as modified by the staff memo that we received tonight?
I'll move that we approve as modified by staff in the memo that we received tonight.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending the hearing. That is the only item on our public hearing item. And the next item on our agenda is the Planning Commission business of the housing element. So that goes to Jill.
Thank you. This will be a quick item. We visit you each year with the Housing Element Annual Progress Report. The report is included as an attachment to...
Excuse me just a moment. If you could carry the conversation outside, you're welcome to, if you want us to give you a break to get out, that's fine, we can. If you want to stick around for the housing element discussion, that's okay too.
You know how to clear a room. For the record, I did not throw you under the bus for being in the last planning commission that approved that project.
You're so gracious.
You managed to do it yourself.
I'm fine with that. So, as you were.
Thank you. So back to the Housing Element Annual Report. This item before you, what we're really hoping for is your acknowledgement through a motion, a second, and a voice vote. And if you have, I don't have a presentation. I'm ready to field questions about this process, the city's housing element, and if you have any thoughts, concerns, interests about the data.
So to be clear, all your duty is to be sure that we receive the report, and you're asking for a motion that we got it.
That is correct, and it isn't to gloss over the topic. You're going to see us in 2 weeks getting very sleeves rolled up on Measure D certificates, and we will talk about all kinds of things going on with housing right now.
Thank you. Colleagues, is there any discussion on this item? If not, is there a motion?
I make a motion to acknowledge that we've received this.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So that takes care of most of our agenda. We are now down to the director's report. So ping pong, it's back to you.
All right, thank you. Your Planning Commission agenda forecast, we will see you on March 24th. We will be presenting the Measure D allocations. We had more applications for certificates outside the downtown area than allocations available. So we have been working through a ranking system, and you will be involved in taking a look at our work and confirming it or adjusting it if needed. We are trying to work with these applicants. They are patiently waiting for us to get through this. This is the first time we've ever actually used the ranking code at the city, and it's about 10 years old. I believe it was used previously with a previous version of the code, but this exact ranking system has not been waltzed through before, and so we'll have to share some of those things with you to get your feedback. Also, you may have a general plan conformance item for the city considering purchasing of 880 Stone Pine Road. That is the site that our corporate yard is currently located on. The property is owned by Post. The City Council has approved the city manager and staff to pursue and complete negotiations of a purchase and sale agreement to convey that property to the city. In April, we are working as hard as we can to bring you the land use plan and holding those dates open. May 12th is, be ready for that one. Mr. Dowdy will be bringing, I believe he'll be bringing the Capital Improvement Program General Plan Conformance. That's another thing that you do annually, just kind of like this Housing Element Annual Report. Our associate planner, Brittany Cozzolino, has been working on 2 other projects that should be ready for you. One has an initial study mitigated negative declaration. It is out circulating right now. It's for the east end of Magnolia on the west side of Highway 1. If you would like a hard copy of that document, let us know. If you're happy with the online version, because we always post these, we will send the link. It's up, and this will give you a little head start reading this before your next meeting. We are also, at some point pretty soon, going to have a notice of preparation hearing for the Poplar Gateways project. So that's a very important point in the process for preparation of the environmental impact report for that project. Moving on to City Council, just a few highlights of things that they've been working on that come through your arena. On March 3rd, they continued the ADU ordinance to a date uncertain. They had advised staff to seek guidance from the California Coastal Commission regarding planned developments at their January meeting. We continued the item to March 3rd, but we haven't received the guidance yet. We're eagerly awaiting that, and once we know how to make the next steps with regards to the planned developments, we will be back with council to try to wrap up that ordinance. While that ordinance is not adopted, the city does not have its own accessory dwelling unit ordinance. Our ordinance is null and void, and we are referring out right now to state law. On March 17th, Council next week, they will see the housing element annual report as well, and a bit of a Measure D update, because we want to keep them informed about what you're going to be looking at. On April 21st, we are planning to bring an agreement forward to Council to consider bringing on a CEQA consultant for the surf dunes proposal. Recently, the listening sessions and priority setting that Council conducts every year as part of their budget process has concluded. There were 3 listening sessions. They were February 27th at the Senior Coastsiders, February 29th at the library, which was a Saturday, and just on Sunday, March 8th at the Ted Adcock Community Center. It was a fabulous session. It was fully in Spanish. I attended all 3. And at the Spanish session, I had the opportunity to experience wearing the headset and hearing the translation, and it's good to be on the other side of that. And so we're really happy that our staff is able to conduct meetings like that. That meeting had about 50 folks. It was great. Today, at 11 o'clock, City Council had their priority session. So they're clicking through, and their priorities have been identified for the next fiscal year. 4 of them are ongoing priorities from this last year, and in fact, probably even previous to that. Affordable housing, sustainability, traffic/transportation demand management, or TDM, emergency preparedness. Last year, their 5th priority was the minimum wage ordinance. That was completed. They added a new 5th priority, which will be focused on downtown vitalization and doing town center planning. This is highly relevant to your land use plan work. It would be inclusive of implementation zoning for the land use plan policies, and also include programmatic CEQA coverage. So we'll be talking about this quite a bit over time once the land use plan is done. And we are also in receipt of a $160,000 grant from the Department of Housing and Community Development to help fund that planning effort. That will not cover the whole thing, but it's a really nice, deep support for a plan of that nature. Council also highlighted 4 projects that they would like us to work on that come within those larger categories. One was the greening of MacDutra Park. Another is to continue to study single-use plastics and to reduce their use. A third one is energy resilience. They talked about microgrid and battery backup systems and a lot of other innovative things that they'd like to learn more about and possibly implement. And the 4th is to think about an incentive, how to implement an incentive to have some of these accessory dwelling units actually be deed restricted affordable. Staff has a lot of ideas about how to do that. That's something that you'll get to hear about as well. They will continue with their budget and CIP review work through April and May. And we'll let you know if anything changes, or we just think it's helpful for you to know what their focus is, because it often results in a project that you're going to see either for a code amendment or for a CEQA document. On March 19th at 8:30 in the morning, the Architectural Advisory Committee will hold a design review session for the Hyatt. We had to change the date. The applicant wasn't ready. We were going to do that in, I think, February. Is that right, Scott? Yeah, so we pushed that out. We hope we get a nice turnout. I talked to you about this previously, and our intent to really have as inclusive a process as possible for design review. Yes?
8:30 or 9:30?
8:30.
On March 19th.
On March 19th, Thursday. They meet the third Thursday at 8:30. They usually meet in the South Day Room, but we are planning to have more public participation for this project. And so we are also planning to have coffee and donuts, and we want everybody to be comfortable. And most folks have not been to a design review meeting. So this is a really great opportunity if they can come in. This input is going to, of course, be conveyed to the commission when this item comes to you. There have been 2 recent training opportunities that the commissioners took advantage of, and I will stop with that if they wish to share anything about those tonight. I am going on Saturday across the bay to get my law and ethics credits that I need to keep up with every year or two, and so we just keep pushing along. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the director's report? Okay, then we've moved on. Oh, yes, Rick.
What was the date of the proposed date for the LUP update?
We want to consume both of your April meetings. We're thinking, I didn't write them down, hold on. We think they're the 2nd and 4th Tuesday, and they are the 14th and the 28th. And I forgot to, I'm sorry, I have one more thing. We're trying to do something that we hope works better for you and for the public. So Tara's helping a lot with this. We're going to have all of the administrative decisions, whether we do a hearing or not, put on the Community Development Director agenda. That agenda gets put up on the city's website. It has a mailing list. Planning commissioners are on that mailing list, as our council. We have obligations to report to you a number of projects, and we try to do it. It's difficult to get them onto the Planning Commission agenda. It's much easier for us to notify you through the mechanism that we're actually using for our administrative review work. So we're planning to put everything there. And so if we approve a tree removal permit or a sign permit that we need to tell you about, we always let you know about important hearings coming up that we see, what's going on with emergency permits and exemptions that are relevant, but not everything is hitting your screen, and we think this is something that may work. So give us a little time to work out the kinks, and I think once we get it into our workflow, it'll go well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, then we're on to Planning Commission communications. Anybody got anything interesting to report?
I mentioned attending that League of Cities training last week, which was very useful and very enjoyable to me. I took voluminous notes. I'm not sure whether any other human would be interested in them, but I'm going to whip them into shape and offer to share them soon.
That would be awesome. Thank you. So the only other thing I wanted to share is I'm knee-deep in the Form 700. Don't forget that we need to get that done by, early April. So if you haven't gotten into it yet, time to dive in. Just give yourself a little room for your 1040s later. If there's nothing else, how about a motion to adjourn?
I had just a
Oh,
question.
yes.
This is not an agenda item, so I just wanted to raise it as, I'm very active in the volleyball community here in town, and whenever I'm at one of these events for 12 hours on a Saturday or Sunday, I get many questions from community members about the status of sand volleyball courts, so at some point would love to get an update on where that's at, and that may be included in one of the future Poplar Gateway projects, so just raising that issue again. I also just wanted to thank the city for working on this sustainability from a power perspective. There's a number of folks who are talking about putting up battery grids and other types of backup solutions, both within neighborhoods as well as proposing commercial projects as well. So get the word out. I'll do my part, but there are a lot of people who are concerned about this, both privately and frankly, it's an equity issue because just because you can afford solar or battery power, most people can't. So it's an important project.
Okay, thanks. Motion to adjourn, please.
I move we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.